Hello, everyone. So let's talk about the new rules that apply if you want to work while collecting Social Security benefits. Now, this is specifically for the year 2026. This is known as the earnings limit. And in today's video, I want to cover these new rules for 2026. And then I also want to answer some of the big questions that I get asked all the time. So these are questions like, does the Social Security Administration look at single or joint income? What happens to benefits that are withheld if you go over the earnings limit? How is the earnings limit actually applied to you? And then when does the limit switch from an annual limit to a monthly limit? Should you tell the Social Security Administration if you're over the limit or wait for them to find out? And will the earnings limit affect spousal or children's benefit? And the big one, the one that I'm asked more often than anything, what actually counts as earnings for this income limit or earnings test as they call it? But before we jump into that, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. You don't want to miss any of the new videos that we have coming out this year because Social Security isn't all we talk about. But let me tell you, in the near future, we're going to start seeing a lot of changes to Social Security. I don't think this is a maybe. It has to happen. And if any of it gets close to law, I'm going to be making a video about it right here, especially on those laws that's going to impact you. Oh, and one other thing. If you haven't downloaded my free guide, The One Critical Shift You Must Make Before Retirement, you should. If you're watching this, you're probably either retired or getting ready to retire. And one of the things that you should have a healthy fear of is a down market in the early years of your retirement. And this is the case for everyone, even those people who have saved well. And in this free guide, I'll show you how to help avoid the sequence of returns risk, why a 60-40 portfolio can often fall short, and how a very simple shift can bring you more confidence and clarity to your retirement income plan. There's a link down in the description where you can get that. Okay, so the way I want to approach this video is to jump right into the numbers that are effective for Social Security retirement benefits in 2026, and then answer the big questions. Now, be sure to stay tuned for those questions because this will be what ties it all together and makes everything make sense. Now, there are two things that you need to know before we jump all the way in. First, the rules that we're talking about today only apply to Social Security retirement benefits. So this is not for SSI and not for Social Security disability benefits. Those two programs have a completely different set of rules. Now, the second thing to know is that the earnings limit for Social Security retirement benefits only apply before your full retirement age. Once you reach full retirement age, there's no limit on earnings. So it's pretty important to know when your full retirement age is because it's different depending on your year of birth. So for everyone born in 1954 or earlier, the full retirement age is 66. And for every year after, it increases by 2 months until birth year 1960, at which point the full retirement age is 67. And under current law, that's where it's slated to stay. Now, with that background, here are the limits. If you make more than $24,180 in 2026, the Social Security Administration will withhold $1 in benefits for every $2 over the amount that you earn. Now, the one exception is during the calendar year you attain for retirement age. During that period, the earnings limit that will apply to you nearly triples to $65,160. Now, the withholding amount on dollars earned over that limit is not as steep either. For every $3 over the limit, the Social Security Administration will withhold $1 in benefits. So that's the earnings limit. But that's a very simplified explanation that has probably now left you with a lot of questions. So let's get into the ones that you're probably asking. So first, does the Social Security Administration look at single or joint income? We know most married couples are used to having all of their household income counted together in one big pot. So for example, if you file your taxes as married filing jointly, earnings from both spouses are counted together to determine how much you owe in taxes. So it does make sense to wonder what happens if a spouse earns more than the income limit, but the other spouse is owed benefits and does not. Does that affect that spouse's benefits for the ongoing year? Well, the simple but not fully complete answer is that joint income is not what's counted. The earnings test is an individual test. If you're married and each receive Social Security benefits from work you performed, your spouse's excess earnings cannot turn off your benefit. As long as those benefits come from your own work history, they're going to be insulated. So, for example, if your wife goes back to work, it may affect her benefit payment, but it won't affect yours. Right? So here's where this can get a little tricky. If anyone is collecting benefits from your work, say for example a spousal benefit, and you have excess earnings, then the amount that they're collecting from your benefit will also be affected. So again, good example of that is a spousal benefit. And if you go back to work, both your benefit and that spousal excess amount is going to be suspended. And the same works for children's benefits. Now the exception to this is an ex-spouse. An ex-spouse's excess earnings cannot affect your Social Security benefit. So, for example, if you're collecting all of your benefits from an ex-spouse's spousal benefit, right, the spousal benefit on their record and they decide to go back to work, that's not going to turn off your benefit. So, there is a carve out there for ex-spouses. So, the next big question, what happens to withheld benefits? Well, if your benefits are withheld from the earnings limit, they aren't gone forever. At your full retirement age, the administration runs a calculation that's called the Adjustment to the Reduction Factor, the ARF. This says that your ongoing permanent benefit can only be reduced for those months you receive a Social Security check. So for the months where you didn't receive a benefit because you were over the income limit, that's not going to count against your reduction because you filed early. So here's how this works. When you file early, your benefits are reduced by a specific reduction factor. Now, it's different depending on where you are relative to your full retirement age. So the reduction factor is 50/9 of 1% for the 36-month period immediately preceding your full retirement age. And then it's 5/12 of 1% for months in excess of 36. Now, if you want to average this for a little back of the napkin math, you can just say that each month of early filing will reduce your benefit by about 1/2 of 1%. Now, that's not completely precise for sure, but it's close enough, right, for you to do some quick math. So, for every month you didn't receive that benefit, that 1/2 of 1% is going to be added back to your benefit at full retirement age. Which brings us to the question, how is the earnings limit applied? So, if you exceed the limit, the administration is going to withhold several months of benefits at a time. For example, let's say you have a monthly benefit of $2,000 and that you're going to be over the earnings limit by $10,000 with a withholding amount of $1 for every $2 over the limit. That means that $5,000 in benefits would be withheld. So they would withhold your benefit payment from January to March, and in April, your checks would start back. Now, what about this one? Should you tell the Social Security Administration if you're going to be over the limit? There's some lack of clarity on this with the Social Security Administration's website, but my recommendation is yes, if you know you're going to be over the limit, you need to contact the administration and let them file a work report with the new estimated earnings. Will this result in benefits being withheld? Absolutely it will. But I can assure you that you do not want to get into an overpayment situation where they catch it and try to unravel those letters that you'll receive from the administration. And here's the thing, some of those letters may not show up for 4 or 5 years down the road. So yes, I would file a work report. When does the limit switch from an annual limit to a monthly limit? Well, thankfully, the Social Security Administration recognizes that some people retire mid-year after they've already had earnings that was over the annual income limit. And for these individuals, there's a monthly income limit. The Social Security website says that the monthly earnings test applies when an entitled beneficiary, that means someone who is actually receiving Social Security, has 1 or more non-service months in a grace year. So here's what that means. In the first calendar year, you receive Social Security benefits and have months of earnings that are less than the monthly earnings limit amount. The income limit turns into a monthly income test. Now, it'll run for the remainder of that calendar year. And after that, it's back to the annual test, which certainly brings up another question about, well, how much is the monthly income limit? Well, it's simply the applicable annual limit divided by 12. All right, here's another one that we've already kind of answered, and that is, will the earnings limit affect spousal or children's benefits? I do think this is important enough for us to go back and answer this again to make sure we're very clear on this. So, if anyone is collecting benefits from your work record, whether that's a spouse or a child, and you go over the limit, not only will your benefit terminate, but any benefits paid from your benefits will terminate. So that's very important to note. And again, as an important reminder, the exception to that is for an ex-spouse. So if you have an ex-spouse who's collecting a spousal benefit from you, or if you are the ex-spouse that's collecting a benefit and the higher earner goes over the limit, that spousal benefit is not going to be affected. All right, the big final question that people ask, what kind of income counts as earnings? Oh, mercy. I get this one all the time where they say, is this considered earnings in the eyes of the Social Security Administration? You know, much of the ins and outs of Social Security benefits almost seem to be designed to be confusing, but in this case, the administration does make it really easy to understand for most types of income that individuals normally receive. Now, the most common types of income that's not going to count towards the income limit includes pension payments, most annuity payments, distributions from IRA and other retirement accounts, dividends, interest income, and capital gains. But the income that does count in the earnings limit is gross wages from employment income and net earnings from self-employment. And plus, there are some additional rules on the time you spend in the business if you're self-employed, especially in that first year. So that covers the basics of the income limits for 2026 and what happens if you work and you're under full retirement age. But if you have questions, be sure leave them down in the comments below. I don't always get the chance to respond, but I do read them all. So before you leave, also if you enjoy this video, be sure to hit that like button and let the robots at YouTube know that this has value and it needs to be shared with other people. Thanks so much for watching.